Which is why I'm really glad that Sam brought up the Great March of Return. If you haven't seen Abby Martin's documentary from Empire Files on the Great March of Return, look, it's amazing. They demonstrated peacefully every Friday for months. And you know what they were met with? Snipers. IOF snipers randomly shooting people in the leg, laughing, shooting people in the head. It is horrific the way that they treated them when they were trying to do the peaceful March of Return in 2018. This is one of my favorite parts of the entire debate, is he really tries to do but they hurt the fence. And I just love Sam's reaction so much, because Sam has the only appropriate reaction to that kind of fucking ridiculousness. He goes, okay.
What I'm getting to is Hamas, I think they knew that this was the reaction that would happen. You know?
I can't imagine that they assumed that there would be this level of destruction.
I mean, that's why they hate Israel. I don't think they underestimate how violent the IDF can be. You know what I mean? That's why they attacked.
I certainly underestimated that they would go this far.
I didn't think they'd go this far, but
bomb hospitals and shoot EMTs and have rules of engagement like this. I mean, I think Hamas is certainly up to criticism for their strategy here.
If that's an understatement.
Well, I mean, if that's they're
a terrorist organization that intentionally antagonized the IDF to come mass slaughter their civilians.
I think that they overestimated whether Israel cared about the hostages, without a doubt. I mean,
they definitely did.
I don't know that there would be anybody who would make a case that this was their plan to have Israel respond. I mean, that's absurd.
Well, and the same is true of I guess Israelis feel the same way. Like, it was totally unprecedented. You know what happened? So maybe they didn't think that their mission would be as successful as it was. On the other hand,
I have no doubt that they did not think that they would that they would have been able to overrun that. I mean, I think
there's been reporting
we were told that the technology of Israel's defense, et cetera,
they're always bragging about their military
something we should emulate in this
technology.
country. I mean, Trump was all talking about that, so I have no doubt that Hamas underestimated,
overestimated. Or underestimate the IDF, I guess.
What they would be able to, what kind of destruction they would wreak, and they underestimated the violence that Israel would perpetrate on Gaza. I don't know that anyone could have imagined that Israel would have engaged in this level of destruction and immiseration and bombing churches and bombing hospitals and blowing up universities and destroying the infrastructure. I mean, it's almost beyond belief.
So one thing that when I was talking to Hasan.
When I was talking to Hasan, oh my gosh. Sam just goes through this devastating point about the destruction that the regime has wrought on Gaza, and how he thinks, and there is a lot of reporting that confirms this, that Hamas did underestimate just how brutal they would be, because that's the reason why they took hostages. They took hostages because they also vastly overestimated how much the regime gave a shit about their own people. They mistakenly thought that if they took hostages, the regime would be like, okay, let's negotiate to get our people back, and they don't give a fuck. I just love how he has to weave his obsession with Hasan into everything. Sam just got done explaining, I think a lot of people did underestimate how vicious and brutal this would be. I also underestimated how weak and pathetic the international response would be. Because before this happened, I don't think I grasped, what a fraud the international bodies were. The UN, the ICC, the ICJ, how weak and feckless and toothless they were, and how so much of it was just cover for the Israeli regime. Yeah, you can say it's naive, but many of us did think that, once you started murdering aid workers and bombing World Central Kitchen and killing children and using starvation as policy, bombing churches and universities and doctors, not to mention the unprecedented amount of journalists that they have killed. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that a lot of people did not anticipate that they would be this openly genocidal and that no one would do anything about it. But what Ethan is admitting, without even realizing he's admitting it, is that if you thought that was going to be the response, what does that say about you?
When I was talking to Hasan, and I'm just going to talk about his point, this is about him personally. When I asked him, because this was obviously the $1 million question, right? By the way, there's not one public bomb shelter in Gaza?
Why would there be?
There's not one public bomb shelter in Gaza?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Gotcha.
I just think that's interesting. It's pretty fucked up, don't you think?
Do I think it's fucked up?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the point.
you
think anything would be standing anymore?
Well, bomb shelters are underground. I mean, they would definitely be a lot safer.
I've seen what happened to tunnels under hospitals.
Your statement is, so you say there were tunnels under hospitals?
Israel built the ones under the first one that they went into. They built it when they were occupying Gaza.
Are you and right? That's true of that one. But I mean, they have a vast tunnel,
What?
obviously, as everybody knows. But I don't care. I don't want to get
As
into weeds on this.
everyone knows.
The $1 million question is like, what can we do?
I think that Ethan also underestimated that Sam knows what he's talking about. Like, he thought he could just do the typical Hasbara points, like, oh yeah, there's a tunnel into the hospital, and Sam's like, yeah, they built it. Don't you think that's really fucked up?
We should call for all aid to be ceased, and I think we should stop protecting them in the
What
UN.
should have Israel done on October 8th? I guess, like, what would have been
He
an
doesn't
appropriate
like his
response
answers, so
for
he
their
just
government?
moves on.
I mean, listen, I think
Without saying not this.
what should they have done
October 8th.
on October 8th? I mean, I think that there is they're hitting strategic sites to attempt to take out leadership. They should have, but let's not, like, to
Well, the
look at
leadership
that
was
moment-
underground.
Yeah, to look at that moment in history, like maybe it was.
I disagree because they had to do something.
They had to go in and bomb or whatever they do. I think that any action that they would have taken at that point, frankly, was a function of literally decades of oppressing people and attempting to bring this to an eventuality.
Right.
I mean, this was.
And so what should they have
written
done?
ages ago? Well, I mean,
You're avoiding, yeah.
Okay, I think what they should have done
Yeah.
is begun empowering Palestinians in the West Bank. They should have done
This is
the
my
same.
favorite answer,
Okay.
Sam. You're saying that this is what Hasan told me. They should disband their government and lift the borders in response to the worst terrorist attack that's ever happened.
I think honestly, when you see that your policies have failed, but I don't
Right?
think
You
it's a
actually
fair
don't believe that
agenda.
that's a real thing, though. I'm
Reevaluate.
interested in having like a real conversation. You can't like live in a fairy tale land where, in response to the
Why
worst
is that
military
a fairy
terrorist attack
tale?
of all time, Israel, who's already, as you state, like genocidal and racist and all these terrible things, is going to lift their borders and disband their
No,
government.
wait a second. You're asking me what they should have done, and that's
No,
different
in a
from what I
realistic way, not in a
expect them to
fairy
do.
tale, Sam.
Well, listen, there is no realistic thing. Their agenda has been quite clear. Their agenda has been, since Ariel Sharon walked on the Temple Mount and tried to scuttle peace talks, the agenda since the assassination of Rabin by arch-Zionists in Israel, the agenda has been to bring about this moment.
Yep.
There is no doubt about it. The annihilation of the Palestinian people has been an agenda in Israel for far too long. So from the perspective, anything I say is fantastical relative to what they would actually do.
True.
Anything.
There's nothing they could have
Anything.
done that because of the situation, everything,
No,
anything
I'm
they would
saying
have done
that
would
this
have been.
was, there was no plan that on this day they were going to do this. But if you go back 10 or 15 years ago and look into
They don't
Benjamin
wanna go
Netanyahu's
back.
brain, the idea that this is ultimately going to happen was definitely the agenda.
Yep.
What, in terms of like
Find a
attacking
way.
Gaza or inciting
find
an
a way.
attack?
I would imagine both, frankly. But to find a way
kind
to
of-
eliminate the Palestinians, this has been the agenda of at one time what I think was a smaller segment of the Israeli body politic, and I think has increasingly become an even larger portion of the Israeli politic.
Yep.
So I mean, anything I say in terms of should is fantastical. Anything.
So yeah, okay. I mean, so this is like I understand where you're coming from, right? Like
There was an opportunity for a ceasefire that was called in November, in December. They could have held a ceasefire at any point, and the amount of killing would have been far less. They could have done that. They could have ended it after a
I mean,
week.
Hamas could have ended the war anytime too.
How could have Hamas ended the
By
war?
leaving, by releasing the hostages.
No, listen. Israel has said time and time again that the release of the hostages is, and the amount of killing would have been far less. They could have done that. They could have ended it after a
I mean,
week.
Hamas could have ended the war anytime too.
Oh my
How could Hamas ended
gosh.
the
By
war?
leaving, by releasing the hostages.
No!
No, listen. Israel has said time and time again that the release of the hostages is not going to end their assault on Gaza. They have said
Exactly.
this
I don't
over
believe
and
that's
over and over.
I haven't
They
seen
have
those
said-
statements. I've seen
Really?
the opposite.
They're there.
I believe that if the
Really, you really haven't seen those statements?
No, I
I
haven't.
know.
I'll review them. I mean,
Sure,
it
yeah.
depends when.
Oh, I'll
It
review
depends when
them.
they were made too, right? Like, is
They
it
could have
was it in
no,
response
no.
to?
At any time. At any time, they could have done that.
Well, what has Hamas done to end the war?
Hamas,
I guess Ethan doesn't read anything because they did actually say that they would put their arms down and forego power in Gaza. It literally says it right here in this fucking paragraph. Not involved in politics going forward. This was like a month ago. Bowler from the Trump administration tried to negotiate this directly with Hamas, and the Israeli regime lost their shit because they didn't want the Trump administration directly negotiating with Hamas, so they sabotaged it. This is a common lie that they continue to tell. You'll see it all the time. AIPAC just posted this like yesterday. If Hamas just gives back the hostages, the war ends tomorrow. Except they've already said 1,000,000 times that they don't care if all the hostages were released. They're still going to continue the onslaught of Gaza because the goal was never to get the hostages. It still is not to get the hostages. The goal is to get the fucking land. Ethan, just because you chose not to do your fucking homework doesn't mean that Sam didn't. There are countless articles like this that show not just Netanyahu, but so many others in the cabinet outwardly and openly saying that getting the hostages is not the main goal. And that, even after they get the hostages, they will continue the onslaught. Netanyahu, quoted as saying, The release of the abductees is a very important goal, but there is a superior goal, and the superior goal is to take all their shit. I don't believe anybody at this late fucking date, 18 months into the genocide, doesn't fucking know this, doesn't know what the actual agenda is.
Tell me the non-fantastical version of what they should have done. Should have been 2 weeks, 3 weeks? How many Hamas leaders, how many members of Hamas should they have killed before they leave? Because we know that Blinken said on his way out that virtually every Hamas member of Hamas that they've killed has probably been replaced by someone who's lost a family member or an entire family or whatnot. So you tell me, Ethan, if you're the one with the sensical perspective on this, and mine is fantastical, what should they have done that would have been appropriate in your mind?
Yeah. So besides like special operations and stuff, I think it would have been a good idea to, I think there's a space where they could like try to find peace partners in Gaza before destroying the whole thing. Like, obviously, they approached it completely wrong, right? But there are ways, I think, that could have happened that are realistic, like trying to forge some kind of peace partner, some kind of alliance, some kind of international coalition.
People were marching in the Great March of Return week after week after week.
Sam, was there Hamas activity at the Great March?
Sinwar was marching. Sinwar was marching.
Were people attacking the border wall?
During the Great March of Return, the first dozens of these things before the snipers? No, they weren't. So there were the people for peace.
There was Hamas activity. They were attacking the fence. They were like trying to cross the border.
They were
like, not militants. Militants were trying to cross the border.
You're telling me that in the first dozen of these marches, there were people attacking the fence?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, again.
I love that so much because Sam's response is the exact response everybody should have to that fucking nonsense. First of all, it's a lie. They were not attacking the fence. They were not attacking the border. He's just making that up. They just always say that because they want to make excuses for the way that they slaughter and treat civilians. They wanted to make excuses for the fact that they would shoot at medics. They would shoot Palestinians during the Great March of Return. And then when medics would try to run to their aid, they would shoot the medics. And then, like what always happens, when people saw it and criticized it, they were like, oh no, it was Hamas running to the border. Now, there were people that threw rocks at it, but that is why Sam's reaction is so on point and so perfect, is because it should be met with the dismissive attitude that he gave it every single fucking time they pull this nonsense. Because even those who did throw rocks at the fence, you really are going to try to tell me that shooting at them is an appropriate response to that? They try to do this shit all the time. They do it in the occupied West Bank whenever they kill someone there. They'll go, yeah, but they were throwing rocks at the tank. And, oh no, not the fence. That is not a sufficient reason to kill someone. Are you fucking insane? You have everything. You have tanks. You have machine guns. You have missiles and weapons and this, that, and the third and fucking everything you can think of. And the Palestinians have nothing except for what? A rock and a slingshot? Are you kidding me? Is this fucking literally David and Goliath? Be fucking serious. So even those who did throw rocks at the fence, and even people who may throw a rock at a tank, the response should never be to fucking kill them. Like, this is crazy. Why is anybody having to say that? So yes, him saying that, oh, they did that, and Sam being like, okay. Like, good. They should be laughed out of the fucking room with that nonsense. And I am being like, oh, well, that's so fantastical to come up with that. No, you know what's fantastical? What's fantastical is to keep a population like animals in a fucking pen, trapped in a cage, and treating them like they are subhuman and then expecting them to like you. That's fantastical. I think about how because of our funding and our aid to the Israeli regime, how that's going to come back to us. And it scares me to think about that, to think about like, wow, there is going to be consequences for us, and it's most likely going to be on civilians in America for what we are funding, for what we are doing, for how we are paying for and empowering the Israeli regime's genocide in Gaza. But you know what? If God forbid something like that happens in America again, I am not going to be shocked. Why wouldn't they hate us? Why shouldn't they hate us? Does that make me upset? Of course it does. But I understand, and I'm not going to play stupid and pretend like doing this kind of shit doesn't foster fucking resentment. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why I can't fucking stand our lawmakers. Because our lawmakers are the ones that are putting us, the American citizenry, in danger by continuing to do this. Because God forbid there to be some type of retaliation, and it wouldn't be unprecedented, as we all fucking know from 9/11. Who do you think would get hurt by that? Regular people would get hurt by that, just like in 9/11. You think any of our politicians are going to pay for that? No, they make money off of war. But Ethan Klein doesn't understand this concept. He thinks that oppressed people should love their oppressors.
Insane. It's genocidal. It's horrific.
They're not pursuing peace.
And
I'm not saying.
were.
I'm saying the opposite,
I don't
Sam.
think Israel is
Well, you asked me
pursuing
what should they have done. I mean, obviously
They
they're
never
not
were
pursuing peace. I agree with you. Like quite the opposite. That's not what they're doing. But I'm saying there could have been a path, although it's not. It's. I think unfortunately, I think their response was inevitable based on everything that happened.
Inevitable?
You think it was inevitable that they would kill these many people and they would use food supplies as a weapon, that they would have leveled hospitals and universities and 90% of the homes? I mean, how
I don't know to what extent, but like a huge response was definitely inevitable. I'm not justifying it, Sam. You asked me a question. I'm answering it. You're putting this on me like I'm saying.
No, I'm just saying inevitability. I wonder what you must think of an Israeli body politic where this level of atrocity is inevitable.
Exactly.
Well, you described your and Hamas's understanding of the IDF. I wouldn't say that. I can't say to what extent, but you agree that a huge response was inevitable.
I listen. I believe a response that was inevitable by Israel, and that is because I have a much more theoretically jaded view of that country and their agenda, I think, than you. But to expect that what they've done is inevitable.
To what? Well, Sam,
I just wonder, what it is that you think is in that body politic.
Yes.
Listen, I don't think it's inevitable. Just to use an example in this country, I don't think that it's inevitable that we are going to be deporting and disappearing, immigrants in this country. I think it's possible, but my perspective on America is still too optimistic to think that's inevitable.
It's so telling that he says it's inevitable. Like, it's so telling what he actually thinks, because this whole time, he's so upset that Sam is impugning the character of the Israelis. But then he's like, yeah, I think this grotesque, psychotic, unprecedented, deranged Holocaust that's happening was inevitable. Well, then what does that say about your society? I was way too naive about Israeli society, because I honestly thought that there would be, people in the streets, once they started showing images of children being blown up, that the people would rebel, right? That's what I thought would happen. And then my mind was blown when I saw no, not only did it not happen, there is a video after video after video, interview after interview, article, poll after poll. They think that this is either good or not far enough. That was shocking to me. I have had many moments throughout this of genuine shock and horror at their response. The TikToks, the way the IOF has conducted themselves, the way that they have treated children and women and elderly people, the destruction of all of these infrastructures, the way that they talk about Palestinians, the way they talk about Arabs, the way that they destroy the aid and they laugh about it and they laugh about them not having water. That was shocking to me, that level of sociopathy.
Part about the killing of innocent civilians. I think that
I said that's what they're doing.
No. I'm saying I wonder if the Israeli body politic.
Oh, you think the Israelis want civilians to die?
I think the Israelis. Obviously not all Israelis, but I think that enough of Israelis to maintain this government believe that Palestinians in Gaza, that their lives have no value, that they are all future enemies. That they
They've said as much.
That they all represent a threat to Israel, and I think that's a twisted perspective.
Just so you know, there were massive demonstrations in Israel, tens of thousands of people in a country that's relatively small. So I think characterizing the majority of the public as wanting to kill civilians is a little sick, personally. But it's. I guess you can say whatever you want.
I'm basing this on conversations with Israeli reporters. That does not seem to be
exactly
in Israel.
They're saying it.
A majority, at the very least, of people who are concerned about the fate of the Palestinians in Gaza. Certainly, they want hostages, and again, not all Israelis. But look, they can make analogous assessments of the United States at various times about things that reflect poorly on our national body politic as well. But, the proof is in the pudding.
Can I tell you something? 300,000 protesters in Tel Aviv, 200,000 in the rest of the country. That's 500,000 people out in the street protesting the government of a country that has maybe 6 million or 5 million in the.
Are you talking about the protests about the judiciary?
I'm talking about to release the hostages.
Okay, to release the hostages.
Yeah. To ceasefire, Sam. That's what that means.
For the hostages.
They were
500,000.
They were calling for a ceasefire or they were calling for a release of the hostages.
Well, what do you? What's the point of telling Hamas to release the hostages? Yeah, of course it's a ceasefire, Sam.
Well, but Israel has, and I know.
Deal with this. Half a million Israel.
Let's look this up and see
Yeah.
how many times the Israeli government has said return of the hostages will not end.
Sam, I'm responding to you saying the
broke.
majority of Israelis
Israel
want
just
civilians to
broke.
die. Half a million
Israel-
people came to the street for a
Israel just-
ceasefire of a country of 5 million, Sam. That's
Israel
10%.
Israel just broke the latest ceasefire. Okay, where is the political response from
Exactly.
the Israeli people? I mean, the idea that Gazans can be held responsible for an election that happened 18 years ago.
Sam, you
when
said the
half
majority of
population is
Israelis want civilians to die.
I think the majority of Israelis do not have a problem with what's going on in Gaza.